Hello viewers, you're welcome to the Proshare Fireside Chat. I am Ottoabasi Abasiekong. This conversation is with leaders on issues around the economy, business environment, and the financial markets. Our special guest today is Mr. Mustafa Chike-Obi, the Chairman, Board of Directors, Bank Directors Association of Nigeria, the Chairman, Board of Directors of Fidelity Bank, and also the inaugural Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria. We will be discussing bank recapitalization and the evolution of Nigerian banking, matters arising. It's great to have you on this conversation, Mr. Mustafa Chike-Obi.
It's a pleasure. Anything new with Proshare is my pleasure.
Very well, very well. Thank you very much. And my co-discussant for this conversation is Mr. Teslim Shitta-Bey, Director of Research, Proshare. Always nice doing this with you.
It's always lovely.
Let's begin, Mr. Mustafa Chike-Obi. I've just reeled out your profile. And if we were to go through your bio, it's quite rich. And one of the background of a very distinguished technocrat like you is your global banking experience. So the first question we'll be looking at is, with what you see, the geoeconomic shifts, geopolitical realities we're seeing today, how does this shape banking in the world today?
Well, banking in the world is a fairly well-developed business in the world. I don't see much changing it. But if you're talking about Nigeria and Africa, there's a lot to be said about Nigeria and Africa banking. But these things come and go. We thought COVID most recently was going to change banking, but it didn't. It had a temporary devastating effect, but things are back to normal. So global banking will survive. They will survive Trump, they will survive Ukraine war, they will survive all those things without much change, because banking is a fairly well-developed process, and it will continue that way for the next, in my opinion, 1,000 years.
Okay, fairly well-developed process, and it will survive whatever shifts that happens. Very well. So,
but we can talk about Nigeria in particular and Africa.
Yes, Africa.
Also, I think that Nigeria. I don't want to anticipate your questions, but yes. Nigeria's banking is developing, is getting better. One of the things that I believe that we don't do well in Nigeria is that we tend to want to do everything. I think we should focus on things we're good at. And the things we're good at are, we're very good at entertainment. We're very good at banking, vis-a-vis Africa. And I think we're quite good at some sorts of services. Legal, for example. Our legal business has developed to the point where no foreigner can come to Nigeria and compete with our legal people. And I think we used to export lawyers and jurists to the rest of Africa. So I think those are three areas we should focus on and government should support. Because you start with your strengths and then you expand to other things. So yeah, I think banking needs more government support. It needs government to realize that that's one of our strengths, and it's something Nigeria should export to the rest of Africa. In fact, I think that the CBN should encourage more expansion into Africa and even give incentives. The way it is right now, you are penalized by requiring more capital to go into other parts of Africa. So I think that's an area that we should look at. More government support for the banking industry.
More government support for the banking industry. Mr. Teslim, you want to take some economic perspective to this?
Yes, thank you also. I think it was interesting that Mr. Chike-Obi was talking about not preempting our question, because I actually preempted one of my questions. But it's good because one of the important things for a country like Nigeria is growth. And there is this assumption that banks must be key levers of growth. Banks need to drive growth, but also banks need to be profitable. In the process of driving growth, they need to be profitable. And you've just talked about us expanding to Africa and all that. So how do banks ensure growth of economies, continental economies, the local economy, the continental economy, while ensuring also that they are profitable? You just talked about recapitalization. There, we will go into more details down the line, but it's important for me to look at bank capital and the ability to push growth. Is there a correlation?
So let us correct one thing. Banks are not supposed to ensure growth.
Okay.
Banks are supposed to support growth.
Okay.
When you start making banks ensuring growth, you change your role from the role of support to the role of a fiscal imperative. And that's not what banks are supposed to do. They're supposed to support growth. And the way you support growth is by profits and by capital. So I agree that banks support growth, but the primary objective of a bank is to support growth. Industries that are efficient should be financed, and industries that are not efficient should not be financed. So we need to separate, again, like I said earlier, what we're good at and finance those things. Look, it is nice to say we have made in Nigeria trucks, made in Nigeria cars. It's not an area of strength for Nigeria. So financing CKDs and parts, every car that's built in Nigeria today is 90%, 80% foreign input. And then we assemble inefficiently the last 20%. So we need to say these are the areas that are important for Nigeria's growth, and that's a fiscal imperative. And then banks will support those areas through those incentives. But this support everything doesn't work. And nobody does everything well. So yes, I think we should support growth, and I think that we need capital to support growth. And capital comes from profits and from equity investors.
Okay, so talk about fixing those things and the support. What are those critical sectors you see the banking sector support? Because, fine, a lot of people have said it's unattainable and you are in that category, so you have stated clearly why this is not feasible. But for the banking sector and its role, what are those critical sectors?
As its role to support the economy.
Yes.
There are three things that make Nigerian economy not productive. And these three things are big buckets, and you can then go into these big buckets and you can fine tune it as much as you want. That's the job of the policy people, fine tuning these things. One, we don't have the skill set. And skills, I use the word skills to mean education, training, experience, exposure. We're lacking in skill set. The second thing we're lacking is what I call tools. And I use the word tools to mean infrastructure, roads, trains, electricity, things that you need to be able to make things. And the third thing we need to address is security. Those are three things and they all have to be there at the same time. If you have two and you don't have the third one, it doesn't work. Now, when those three things are there, then you need finance to support them. So what should finance be supporting? It's not just banking. It should be supporting security, infrastructure, and skills. So that's what banks should be supporting. So what government should be telling us is, if you invest in electricity, we will give you some incentives. If you invest in education and skill acquisition of a certain type, we will give you some incentives. If you support security infrastructure, we will give that. So we know where we're going. Absent, you can have all the money in the world, all the banking finance in the world. If you don't have infrastructure, you're not going anywhere. My favorite story, I tell people, I've been saying this for years, nobody has taken it up, unfortunately. If you have a car, the flat tire, all of us in this room cannot change it without the tools. All of us. You can't even undo the knot. All of us together can do it. But if you have the equipment in the trunk boot of your car, a lady by herself can change the tire. So the importance of skills, of tools, is very, 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 very big. And we don't have them, okay? I measured, when I was working on Wall Street, They measured my productivity. Me, the same person. And when I came here, my productivity was about 10% of what it was in America. The same person. Because I had everything I needed to support me, like again, the tools in the trunk of the car, to do my job. So we need to really, really focus. How do we make this country more productive? And then you would then direct banks and other financial institutions to fund those areas. Because once our productivity is up, we will solve all our other problems, which is what we're talking about.
Very interesting. I like the fact that you anchored on your Wall Street experience, global experience, and Teslim, want to talk about the digital asset development and, of course, how that
Yes, I would like to talk about digital assets, but I don't want to escape this point because it's very fundamental. You've told us what the problems are. I'm interested in how do we correct them? Because when you say incentives, yes, good enough, but beyond incentives, how do you get the right, for instance, educational quality passing through our institutions and translating into the marketplace? Everybody has complained about the quality of Nigerian education, the quality of Nigerian. These same people go abroad and they win laurels all over the world. So what's the problem?
Very good question. Very good question. Who goes abroad from Nigerian education? The top 10%. That's who goes abroad. So it is no surprise that the top 10% will do well there. Okay? And who stays behind? The bottom 10%. So yes, it's a selection process, which is unfair, but it's reality. It's reality. So let me deal with let us go to skill acquisition. I studied mathematics at university, and I think there was some generous help from the government, either in the fact that the school fees were low, or I can't remember if I got a scholarship or whatever. Maybe I did. So I was financed by the government to study mathematics. But I don't think government should finance mathematics students. It's not critical for Nigeria. If you want to study mathematics, let your father pay for it. If you want to study history, let your parents pay for it. Let Nigeria pay for the skills that it thinks it needs. So let me give an example. Engineers, metal workers, okay? Those things that we need to make things, we'll pay for it. We'll give incentive. Those people that want to study history or mass communication or law, they should pay for it. I would have supported, for example, and this is controversial, if you're sending your children abroad for school, I would charge you a significant tax. So we tell the embassies, any scholarship you give for Nigerian, any visa you give to Nigerian to go and study in England, let the parents pay £10,000 a year. And let that money be collected and used to develop our schools in Nigeria. You can go if you want. But as long as your parents are making the money in Nigeria, let them pay something for it. Because what we have now is we have the richest and the best and the brightest going abroad to school at huge expense. And then we're leaving the people behind here with no facilities. When I was growing up, University of Lagos was competitive. Today, it's not, really. It's still doing its job, but it's doing the job with his hand tied behind his back. If we're collecting money from people who I know someone who sent 7 children abroad to school. If we're collecting £10,000 a year from that person, maybe he won't send 7, maybe he will send 2, and the rest will stay here. And if the rest are here, he'll have more interest in making sure the schools are working better. So again, my point is that all these problems we have solutions. And the solutions that everybody in this room will support. It's nothing controversial. I think everybody in this room will support the fact that if you're sending your child to Eton, pay us, maybe it's not £10,000 a year, pay us £5,000 a year so we can use the money to buy used computers for University of Lagos students. Now, people will say to me, the government will waste the money or the government will chop the money. But that's a different set of problems. The correct policy is to make people who are very, very wealthy, who are escaping our education system to help us improve it. I think that's, again, we can go through all those things and have all solutions, but my point is that if you mean well and you think well, there are solutions to all those things.
Okay. Thank you very much. Well said. And like you rightly pointed out, also controversial, but definitely, yes, a solution that is maybe feasible. But let me move on to what Otto had talked about earlier, cryptocurrency.
Yes.
It's been very controversial all around the world. Some people say that yes, governments will say yes, they will accept cryptocurrency as a reserve currency. Some said no, we don't even agree to the concept of crypto because we don't know what animal it is. We don't know whether it's a bird, a bat, or any other thing. What's your opinion about crypto and the evolution of crypto and how it's likely to affect finance?
So I have a nephew who is gung-ho on cryptocurrencies. And he called me every time to harass me about cryptocurrencies. And I said to him, I don't understand it. And I'm not uneducated, but I didn't understand it. So I went to a course in London Business School on cryptocurrencies. So let me tell you what they are. Because many people don't know what they are. Cryptocurrency was devised to escape what they call a centralized ledger. So if you come to this bank to put your money, we have a centralized ledger that says, we have taken 10 naira from you, and here's your 10 naira. So when you want to do 5 naira, we'll take 5 naira from what you gave us, and give it to you and reduce it. That ledger is centralized, and any government can inspect it. Government come and inspect our books and see who owns what. So these people said, let's create a decentralized system where there's no ledger that anybody can see. That's the origin of this. But the problem with a decentralized ledger is, how do you verify transactions? How do you, when you say, give me 5 naira out of my money, how do you verify it? So they created a complicated way of doing it. There are a number of ways of verifying it. But one of it requires what they call a private key and a public key. The private key the public key is given. Then you have to derive the private key, and you have to derive it through using what they call random number generators, and it's very difficult to solve it. So they solve it by taking a bunch of, that's why they call it blockchain. They take a block of transactions, and then you solve for the private, and then when you've solved it, then you know the transaction it takes a lot of computer, but nobody knows who owns what. So it's a decentralized ledger. It's one of those things that, I've explained all this to you, so tell you where I'm going with this. It's one of those things that will thrive when it's in a minority. But it will not survive if everybody adopts it. Because if everybody adopts it, it will take too much computing time to verify transactions. Transactions will get slow, and governments will not tolerate it when all transactions are centralized. So it's one of those things that will survive when it's 10% of the transactions, maybe up to 20%. When it gets to 50% of all transactions, it will die. Now, what the value of it is, the valuation of it is, up to the point at which it becomes too big, I don't know. But I can guarantee you that cryptocurrencies will never replace the centralized ledger system. Never. It will be part of it. It has bastardized a part of it. And how large it gets, I don't know. But once it starts getting to 50%, 60% of all transactions, it will die a natural death. When that time is, other people can tell you. But I'm telling you that government, it will never be universal.
Some governments are looking at it as a reserve currency. How do you see that?
It's not a currency. It's just a decentralized ledger. That's all it is. It's not a currency. You can call it currency all you want. But my point is, it has a value because, like I told you, it gets more and more expensive because as you have more and more of it, it's much more difficult. They have more transactions, more difficult to verify. That's what they call mining. When they say they're mining, it's just verifying transactions. Really, it's the same expression. So the value can get high because it gets more and more expensive. But at some point, it will be impossible. So if I was advising the Nigerian government, I would say, study it, observe it, keep an eye on it, regulate it, and find a way to tax it. That's what I would say. But that is going to replace Naira and all that stuff, it's not going to happen. And it's not going to replace, the reserve currency right now is the dollar. They're trying to challenge that. I don't know how successful that will be, but there'll always be a reserve set of currencies, and it won't be crypto.
How do you see the central bank digital currency issue, the digital naira, the e-naira?
Well, I know it was tried under Emefiele, and at the time it was being mooted. I was asked a question about it. So I called my friends in the United States and said, why don't you have a digital dollar? And the answer they gave to me was that two things, security and penetration. So I said, you in the US are worried about security and penetration, and we in Nigeria are not. And they laughed at me. And I knew it wouldn't work because we don't have enough penetration in terms of digital penetration. And we're very, very good at avoiding security. So once it becomes significant, there'll be security issues. So I don't think we're ready for it. And it's the same question I asked about this, what was this gas thing they wanted to do for cars? CNG. So I asked them in America, why don't you guys have CNG? And they said it's not effective, it doesn't work. They don't have it. So I always tell my policymakers, go and ask people in developed countries who have money to throw away why they're not doing something you want to do. Sometimes it makes sense for us to do it if they're not doing it. But let us understand, why are there no CNG buses in the UK? Why are they not universal? They have gas, they have money, but they're not using CNG buses. They're not using them universally in the US. So why do we think it's better when those countries are using fossil fuels and they've gone to electricity and hybrids? They didn't go to CNG. So why are we thinking that we know better than them? And we may sometimes, but let us know their thinking. So no, I'm not gung-ho in Nigeria adopting new things.
Very interesting insights. Looking at Nigeria recently, the ratings of Moody's show that we moved from CA1 to B3. That shows some improvement. But when you look at monetary and fiscal policy, there's been this talk and analysis that there's need for alignment to restore greater economic confidence. Based on your experience, what do you see in this regard?
Well, you say they've upgraded the rating of Nigeria. Yeah. They have, properly. But you have to look at Nigeria as an entity which has improved in a number of ways. But then you have to look at Nigerians.
Very, very genuine concern.
Yeah. So let me bat off Otto's question. You talked about Nigeria. Good enough, Fitch has just improved the ratings of Fidelity. So how would you have a similar analysis?
Our friends at Proshare highlighted a few of them that were not so good. However, those are the valid questions. Are these things consistent with the welfare of your stakeholders? And in my case, I would say, in case of Fidelity Bank, I would say the answer is largely yes. Low cost deposits, that is the bloodstream of the banking system. When you mobilize low cost deposits and you deploy them effectively, that's the bloodstream. And if that's what they're saying is their driver, then we're happy because that's a strategy we think is good for everybody. But yes, that analysis always has to be done, yes.
Let me just go on a little bit about this. What would you say, based on the analysis of Fitch, which was quite comprehensive and showed fundamental improvements in the underlying variables?
3 or 4 years ago.
Yes, we did. Yes, exactly. We said that. Going forward, how do you see Fidelity progressing in those areas that Fitch has pointed out? Like you just mentioned now, the cost of the deposits, getting cheaper cost of funding for your operations. What other things can we expect to see from Fidelity going forward, especially with the new recapitalization?
Well, look, we know we're going to do international expansion.
Okay.
We know that. We know that we're looking very seriously at taking a whole core strategy. So we're going to go into other businesses.
Okay.
That affects Fidelity. We know those things. But we also have a retreat in July. I think it's in July, where we'll review all those things. We have 2 retreats. We have a mini retreat in July, and we have a major retreat in November, December. We do that every year. So we look at half-year progress and we look at full-year progress. So we'll review all those things. But generally, the 2 things that you can take from us is that we will do more international expansion this year.
Okay.
And we will look very seriously at doing a holdco.
Okay.
So the sequence of events is finish the capital raise, which we expect to finish June, July.
Okay.
Then I think we plan to expand to 2 or 3 countries.
Okay.
Before the end of this year. And then after that, we'll look at the benefits of a holdco.
Okay.
So those are the things that we need to do. Okay. But we want to grow organically. We don't want to rush it.
Okay.
We'll do things step by step. We've done well enough so far, but there's much more we can do.
Mm. Let me pivot you away from Fidelity briefly. We had a conversation earlier where we talked about the Asset Management Company of Nigeria. AMCON. Yes. Your baby. Yes. So that's now there is concern amongst financial analysts about a supposed 10-year sunset clause.
Let me correct this. You people keep saying this thing. It is not true.
Okay.
There has never been in the law of AMCON a 10-year sunset clause. It is not true. That 10-year was a planning horizon between Central Bank of Nigeria and the AMCON inaugural management. We developed a 10-year plan whereby AMCON will have finished what it was going to do, and in 10 years, we'll look at it again. All assets and liabilities will have been paid off in 10 years. The key assumption in that 10-year plan was the rate of growth of bank assets. Okay. It had averaged 25% a year for the 5 years prior. And we used a 20% growth rate. If that bank asset had grown at that rate, AMCON would have finished everything needed to do, paid off its liabilities within 10 years. Okay. What happened was that because of stability issues, the CBN itself then went into a major tightening stand, restrictive stand. All of those CRR increases and all those things came that period. So the bank assets growth rate dropped from that 20% we had targeted to 12.5. That 12.5 extended the life of our 10-year plan. So when we saw that, the first thing we did was we raised the contribution of banks from 30 basis points to 50 basis points. And then we extended the plan to 2023. Okay. 3 years. That's what they created. Obviously, that's not enough. That's not enough. And you get into this mission creep issue where you keep extending and you don't know what you're doing anymore. But the Minister of Finance just inaugurated the new AMCON board. And he emphasized the fact that they should be finding ways to come to an end of AMCON.
So when AMCON is off, what institution would there be to ensure the recovery of bad loans and also ensure relative stability in the system?
Well, there was a system in place. Okay. And AMCON was only necessary because a lot of things happened and there was 10 banks in trouble at the same time. If it's one bank or two banks, there's a system that can manage it. It's not necessary. AMCON was just an emergency thing for a very big problem, and it should not be part of the landscape. And it's not part of the landscape of any country. They come and they go. But there's a system to manage it. What has happened now is there's better risk management in banks. The courts are more useful in helping banks recover their bad loans. And so we're hoping that there won't be this kind of big scale intervention in the future. And CBN is doing a fantastic job of examination and making sure that any areas of risks are dealt with. Hence, again, that was a good reason for increasing the capital of banks, to make sure that banks have adequate capital to weather shocks like that.
Because when you attend a lot of these annual general meetings, the shareholders keep raising that concern that AMCON charges on the banks impede into their shareholding. But it's good to know that with what we're seeing, it will definitely wound up and we can...
Otto, before you actually skip from there, very good point. The AMCON charges, banks have complained about those charges.
I have complained about it.
Exactly. So, are you still complaining now?
I'm complaining. I'm the loudest complainer.
So what's the problem with the charges?
Because it's the second largest item on your expenses. That was not the design.
What went wrong?
I've told you what went wrong.
Mission drift?
No, what went wrong was that the rate of growth of bank assets that we assumed didn't happen.
Okay.
And we did not realize at the time that CBN controlled that because, and look, they properly tightened because there was a problem at the time. They had to tighten. But the tightening affected the plan.
Okay.
And so, and believe me, I can show you the model. I mean, that changed from 20% to 100%, threw everything out of whack. But that doesn't mean it can't be fixed now.
Okay.
And whatever ills it is curing is creating a much bigger problem down the road.
What to do then? What would be the alternative?
One of the alternatives, assuming that they're thinking correctly, is to say to banks, we want you to lend to electricity. We want you to lend to agricultural processing because much of our food post-harvest losses in Nigeria are among the highest in the world, and processing and storage will help with that. So if you lend to those sectors, we will give you your CRR money back, and you can lend at no more than 15%. Because the CRR is at zero.
Yes.
Now, what I've said is that Emefiele tried it and it was abused. They were giving it to their friends. That's what I've been told. I have no evidence of that, but that's what I've been told. Again, I always say, saying corruption is going to get into a process doesn't mean the process is wrong. So if we know that, let us do it again, but let us do it with those guardrails so that that doesn't happen, so that it's spelled out clearly. And you can have somebody outside the CBN who approves those things. But my point is, we should give cheap money to places that need it. Again, security, agricultural processing, education, there are things I can tell you. So there's a bunch of CRR money that can be given back to the banks to lend to specific purposes. That's the first thing I would do, assuming that the CRR has to stay at 50%. I think it's by far the highest in the world. So there are things to do. We can spend all day thinking about things that can be done. But again, my point is, as I've always asked for dialogue between CBN and BDAN especially. Consult us. We'll consult you. Let's have. I've been asking for a formal, maybe once a quarter meeting between BDAN and CBN, and all they have to do is listen to us. They don't have to do what we say, but if they're listening to us and we have a dialogue, I think it will help everybody.
Okay. And speaking about BDAN, beyond that quarterly engagement with Central Bank of Nigeria, remember you did some work with Proshare, look at these charges, NDIC and resetting, which was quite remarkable, and your advocacy around the recent windfall tax. But what is happening in terms of building capacity to continue to be a future-ready association?
What we want to do is, have the banks participate more in BDAN. But we don't need to build capacity of the members of BDAN. They're all directors. By the time you're a director of a bank, and believe me, to be a director of a bank, there's a tremendous amount of vetting by Central Bank of Nigeria, and by DSS, and by everybody. So it's not a capacity issue. It's a relevance issue.
I would like to jump on quickly what also said about BDAN, because I'm intrigued by the association, actually. And what tickles me a bit is the fact that, pardon my frankness, bank directors don't seem to like themselves. They greet themselves, they say hello and pat themselves on the back. But when it comes to collaboration, you don't see that. For instance, you find out that, I can't remember when last I've heard about three banks coming together to fund a project, coming together and saying that, you know what, look, I have this large project, let's come together. There seems to be a distancing and an ego issue amongst the directors that, look, I'm big enough, I'm big, I don't need you, another. I'm just thinking aloud now. I may not be correct, but I just
First of all, that may be your experience.
Okay.
But let me say that banks are also competitors.
Yes.
And therefore, you may see some competition among bank directors, but that is healthy competition.
Okay.
On issues that have affected the banking system, I must tell you that at BDAN, we've all agreed. We have an advocacy agenda that we set out once a year, and we call all the bank CEOs and chairmen, and we present it to them, and they approve it. So it's very, very collaborative. Before we say anything, we talk to all the banks to make sure that everybody agrees with what we're about to say on behalf of BDAN. But we're competitive with each other, okay? But there are some large, when you say they don't work together on projects, we have a lot of syndicated loans, large syndicated loans that comprise many, many banks, So I don't think it's quite correct that they don't work together. We do syndicated loans together, we work together, but we also compete. We compete for this. All of us want to do Dangote's business. So there's some competition there. So maybe that's what you're picking up. But I would think that as an industry, we're quite collaborative. Okay.
Now, on the last point concerning BDAN now, what can we expect going forward? Are there things that we should expect from BDAN in terms of advocacy, in terms of one or two collaborations amongst bank directors? What is BDAN likely to do going into 2026, for instance?
Well, going to 2026, I won't be chairman of BDAN past this year. Okay. So there'll be a new chairman. So I don't want to speak for his agenda or our agenda. But what I think is that there's three bodies that speak for banks generally. CIBN, BDAN, and some combination of bankers committee and body of bank CEOs. I find that CIBN is more capacity building and more technical and more trading, and they do that well. I find that bank CEOs are limited in what they can say, especially at bankers committee, because CBN, the regulator, is sitting there looking at them. And my hope and my intention was that BDAN be the advocacy group for the banking system, because we're more anonymous. You can't, it's difficult. You can, if you're vindictive enough, punish Fidelity for what I say as BDAN chairman. It's a little bit more anonymous, and we can advocate more aggressively interest of the banks through BDAN. That's my ambition. That's what I've tried to do. I think BDAN was a relatively unknown entity, and I've tried to make it more relevant and visible. But there's work to be done, and I hope the next BDAN chairman will continue in that vein and make BDAN more visible and more relevant in terms of advocacy for the banking system.
So Mr. Mustafa Chike-Obi, very interesting conversation, but what do you see as the outlook for the recapitalized banking industry beyond 2026, and how Fidelity Bank will play in here as we expect banks to become bigger, brave, and bolder in what you said, supporting economic activities in the country?
I hope that the banks are better run. I hope that banks will be more careful about risk. I hope that banks will be more responsible to society. And I hope there's more international expansion, and that we support the growth of the economy as the government directs. And so we pray that the government gives us the right signals and the right directions, but that we cannot control. I mean, I worked in America. The regulator, the Fed, is nowhere near as intrusive on the banking system as we are here. But again, let's hope those things are temporary and that we'll work together with the government to grow our economy to where it should be.
Thank you very much for your insights, Mr. Mustafa Chike-Obi. Of course, you were several hats, chairman of the board of Bank Directors Association of Nigeria, chairman of the board of Fidelity Bank, and of course, inaugural managing director and chief executive officer of the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria, which you call your baby. So it was very interesting having this conversation with you. And of course, we also know, son of our great mathematician, Professor Chike-Obi. When you said you did mathematics, did you take that from your father too?
I have no idea how I decided to do mathematics. It just happened. I wish it was some big revelation. It didn't happen like that. It was just natural drift.
Thank you very much for the time and this conversation on bank recapitalization and the evolution of Nigerian banking industry matters arising. Thank you once again for the time.
Okay.
And of course, it was good having this with you, Mr. Teslim Shitta-Bey, Director of Research, Proshare. Thank you very much for that. Yes. To our viewers, of course, it was a very interesting conversation. And to get further insights on this, log on to our website and follow our social media platforms to get further insights on this conversation. We also want to inform all our viewers that Proshare on Wednesday, June 11th, 2025, will be launching the 4th edition of its Tier 1 Banks report. Title of that report is Getting Bigger, Braver and Dominant, the Class of 2025. If you log on to our website, you get further insight on this upcoming significant event in the banking industry. I'm Ottoabasi Abasiekong. Thank you for being part of this conversation and have a great day.